From nothing, a light emerges into being, a light that guides, illuminates, a light that calls us out of darkness, a light given, a light shared, a light protected. We are gathered together on this day to celebrate the intellectual and labor powers of candidates who seek a degree award and to graduate. It is time now for a reflection, a time also for joy, a time to acknowledge the gifts and abilities of all members of our academic community, and especially those of our candidates. The Global Center for Advanced Studies, GCAS College, welcomes all people from all over the world to come together to be with us in our search common for truth, for courage, to refine our intellectual curiosity, bound together in our common commitment to peace, truth, and justice. At this time, we remember our past, our common story. We are pleased to have with us today Professor Rocky Gangle to speak about our history, our collective memory, our individual memories. As most of you know, Professor Rocky Gangle has taught for GCAS. He was, in fact, a founding member of our original GCAS, the Global Center for Advanced Studies, in the United States in 2013. He is now a full professor at Endicott College near Boston and is for us a distinguished research fellow. Professor Rocky Gangle's contributions to philosophy are many, specifically focused on the philosophy and ontology in mathematics and logic and a philosophy of immanence. He has published many books on the subject and has translated texts from French philosopher Francois Laruelle. It is therefore with a great honor and pleasure to welcome to our graduation ceremony Rocky Gangle.
Wonderful to see so many familiar faces. It's quite humbling to see so many unfamiliar faces. GCAS has grown to such an extraordinary degree just in the last few years that I'm astonished at how many of you I have not met. I look forward to meeting you. This is a threshold moment for GCAS. Up to this point, GCAS has developed in a series of phases. I wouldn't want to call them linear phases because the movement has been anything but linear, but there have been successive instantiations of the institution. It began, I think, more or less 7 years ago in the United States as a kind of incipient idea. It was housed for a time in Colorado and then in Michigan. And then the second phase began with a move across the Atlantic in a partnership with Alma Mater Europaea University in Maribor, Slovenia. And this was a time of growth and experimentation. And I believe the first summer institute with the movement away from that partnership. For a time, GCAS wandered for a bit like Israel in the desert, but found a new home in Dublin, Ireland. GCAS College Dublin now is the official name. And I would say that was the beginning of the third phase. And really in the last year or so, I think the institution has entered a fourth phase of significant global networking, now with connections in Central and South America through GCAS Latino America, in Africa with Uganda, developing connection in Ethiopia, in Australia, quite recently, now a connection in Asia with Jakarta. And so this is really an extraordinary global institution that has developed. But I think what makes this event special is that for the first time that successive or quasi-linear movement has made its first loop or its first cycle. With you PhD candidates, you now as a cohort have completed your project or are very soon to complete it. And you have established now the first cycle so that all PhD candidates coming after you will in some sense be repeating your accomplishment. And so you are really in an extraordinary position of being the first full cycle of the institution in its degree granting capacity. The French philosopher Paul Ricardo writes of an intermediate level of reference between the poles of individual memory and collective memory, where concrete exchanges operate between the living memory of individual persons and the public memory of the communities to which we belong. And I think as GCAS now steps into a kind of official institutional status, it's worth recalling the network of shared memories that we've made over the past years. And I'd like to just very quickly share a handful of memories that I have with you and that I hope some of you can recall as well in various ways. The first is the sweltering classroom in Maribor at AMEU in the summer with 2 students in person and then a handful, half dozen or so students connected via webcam. This is well before the age of Zoom when those kinds of connections were quite new. And we would go for 4, sometimes 5 hours straight working through Hegel's Science of Logic and the mathematics of category theory, sweating profusely, but so deeply engaged in an international, intercontinental connection that was something completely new, at least to me, in the sense of being able to participate directly in these connections using technologies that we now have all become much more familiar with. The second memory is a kind of diffuse constellation of memories that seems to cut across space and time. And this is the memory of the dancing and the shared meals at the various summer institutes over the past several years. That somehow it seems as if the dancing at those institutes was one continuous stream that somehow passed from Maribor to the Performing Arts Forum to Le Caillou and was somehow a single revel, and the meals that we shared. And I think that this is a unique part of GCAS, this ability to share those kinds of deeply human, affective experiences. The collateral explorations that we've participated in, exploring a World War II bunker outside of Le Caillou, France, and meeting together at a medieval chapel with pagan carvings and discussing them and looking at them and being present to this unique space. And then finally, a very particular memory of being dropped off in the middle of the French countryside in what felt like the middle of nowhere and being greeted by a gruff elderly man wearing a hat that said "Trouble," and having him say, "Get in the car, I'll take you to the Performing Arts Forum." And that was my first meeting with Walter South, who very sadly this last year passed away. And this part of our collective experience is this possibility of collective loss. But just this last year, it struck me, I'm sure many of you remember Walter's hat of trouble, that it resonated for the first time with me with the passing of the great activist and politician John Lewis and his notion of good trouble. And that this, I think, is something that binds us together as a community and as an institution, that we are committed to something like good trouble. So in conclusion, congratulations to all of you graduating today. And I would like to append to the informal GCAS motto, GCAS kick ass, the secondary phrase, good trouble. So GCAS, kick ass, good trouble.
I am pleased to introduce to you now the Vice President's address from Professor Dr. Asfar Hussain. Professor Hussain grew up in Bangladesh, and as he acquired more critical skills in his adolescent years, began reading philosophy and eventually went into journalism, where he would write and publish articles that was increasingly critical of the unjust ruling order at the time in Bangladesh. As a result of that, there was much heat that came over him and ultimately forced him to go into exile, where he sought harbor in the United States of America, which sadly for us today is really no longer the case. Professor Hussein at the time was pursuing his PhD at Washington State University and now is Associate Professor of Literature and Liberal Arts Studies at Grand Valley State University. He has been part of the GCAS community since its inception, where he took the office of Vice President in the fall of 2013, has attended many conferences, including our conference in Athens in 2015 and our seminar in Havana, Cuba in 2017. It is therefore with great pleasure to welcome to you today our Vice President, Professor Dr. Asfar Hussain.
Honorable GCAS Chancellor, Professor Dr. Kristen Davis, Honorable GCAS President, Professor Dr. Lewis Gordon, Honorable Keynote Speaker, Professor Dr. Jane Anna Gordon, dear colleagues, distinguished guests, and our very dear degree candidates who have gathered today, let me begin by saying my heartiest congratulations to our degree candidates who have now reached a significant milestone in their life journey. And let me also state with full force how deeply delighted I am to be a part of this historic event, the inaugural GCAS graduation commencement. I think it's also a great milestone for GCAS to have this event today. Yes, as has been pointed out, I've been with GCAS since 2013, the year of its inception. And GCAS has just turned 7 years old. And on this joyous occasion today, I can't help sharing with you certain ideas and assumptions underlying, guiding, informing, and even energizing some of GCAS's inaugural moments, even its inaugural vision. Well, I've been asked to be brief for the right reason, of course, and I will try to be as brief as I can. Indeed, GCAS is a unique and creative intervention in the area of higher education today. By now, globally acclaimed for its seminars with the world's leading philosophers, journalists, academics, artists, activists, and public intellectuals, while also by now widely known for providing critical learning spaces to young and non-traditional scholars and researchers and students around the world. GCAS held nearly 500 different meetings, classes, workshops, and conferences in which GCAS taught and engaged with over 100,000 people from more than 80 countries. Today, at this coronavirus-ridden global conjuncture, in the era of catastrophic capitalism, GCAS has emerged as a more meaningful alternative to traditional academia than ever before, as GCAS continues to combine creativity, technology, and commitment to democratic and emancipatory education. But GCAS began by affirming and articulating its deep commitment to translating the idea of a debt-free education into a reality. In other words, GCAS has boldly run against the grain of today's outrageous commodification and commercialization of education. Indeed, right from the beginning, GCAS has envisioned an education that is student-centered, democratic, debt-free, and emancipatory, of course, offering the kinds of exciting and even life-changing courses and seminars that are not generally available in traditional academia, which turns both students and education into commodities. It is not for nothing that GCAS's former president and current affiliate faculty member, Alain Badiou, one of the leading philosophers of our time, significantly summed up GCAS's vision in 2016 thus, I quote, "The purpose here is not to accumulate some knowledge for finding a place in the world as it is, even if to know the world is useful and to find a place are necessity, but to learn what is our true thinking for changing the world under the principles of equality and priority of the common good against the present dictatorship of private property and individual satisfaction," unquote. Our current president, Professor Louis Gordon, a globally acclaimed philosopher, and my favorite philosopher, of course, has asserted in his message given on the 7th birth anniversary of GCAS, and I quote Professor Gordon here, "Education should be available to everyone. This pertains not only to all of us here and now, but also to those to come. Although no one can do everything, everyone can do something. We in the GCAS community are doing our part in what could be a revolution, a flourishing life," unquote. Indeed, right from the beginning, we have held that there is no such thing as neutral education. To put it simply and even bluntly, in the words of the Brazilian philosopher of education and pedagogist Paulo Freire, I quote, "Education either functions as an instrument to bring about conformity or freedom," unquote. And what is this practice of freedom? What is this practice of freedom? By it, we mean education itself as an active, dynamic, even dialectical and lifelong process of learning, relearning, and even unlearning, such that we deal critically and creatively with reality and discover how to participate in the transformation of our world. As Kristen Davis has already pointed out, I come from Bangladesh, characterized as it is as the periphery of the periphery under global capitalism. And I can't help invoking the great Bengali philosopher poet, Rabindranath Tagore, who said something to this effect: "Liberatory education is not possible without compassion, curiosity, courage, and commitment to truth and justice." With those words, then I conclude, while once again congratulating with joy, happiness, and hope our degree candidates today. Thank you. Thank you all.
So I call the Chancellor to stand for examination. I figure I'll add some sternness to that. So you're to say, Kristen, I am present.
I am present and prepared for examination.
Chancellor, I recognize that you have brought before us today degree candidates. Do you affirm that all degree candidates herein recognized have met the rigorous requirements of the academic program and are thus prepared to be bestowed with the honor of a degree from the Global Center for Advanced Studies, GCAS College, Dublin?
I hereby affirm and believe that all degree candidates herein recognized today in this meeting have met or exceeded the degree requirements for GCAS.
Okay. Present the first candidate for degree award. And I'll add to that, please.
I present our first candidate for the Doctor of Philosophy degree award, Susanna Elizabeth Livingston.
By the power vested in me, on behalf of the GCAS community, I hereby pronounce Susan Elizabeth Livingston, Doctor of Philosophy.
I have the honor of being the first student to complete my doctorate at GCAS. And I was just now first asked if I was committed to speaking truth and using my intellectual abilities for the benefit of humanity and all living things. I think this phrase, in addition to its synchronicity with the ethos around GCAS, provides us with the real and unerring purpose of all education. Education should be available to everyone that seeks it because it benefits all living things. Committed to speaking truth and using my intellect for the benefit of humanity and all living things. Truth is often unpopular, and not all people want to use their abilities to benefit humanity, but most do. After 20 years of teaching high school and working with thousands of teenagers and seeing their righteous indignation at the atrocities of the past and their yearning to institute positive change, I can honestly tell you most do. What's broken are the systems in which we're mired, and GCAS offers us an alternative to one of those systems. And it's only fair that this comes with its own responsibility. My Cherokee father, who is watching right now with my mother, recently reminded me that the word for responsible translates in Cherokee to he or she carries it. And this sums up what a degree really means, that with the privilege of study and new knowledge comes a job to carry that knowledge, to transport it to others. So I am remarkably grateful and proud to carry, to move knowledge with all of you. So thank you so much. Thank you, Dr. McLaren. Thank you, Dr. Davis. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Dr. Livingston. Chancellor, present the next candidate for degree award.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to present the next candidate for degree award. I present to you Doctor of Philosophy degree award for Stephen Bueno.
Are you, Stephen Bueno, committed to speaking truth and using your intellectual abilities for the benefit of humanity and all living things?
I so affirm this commitment.
I should add to that also that the degree of philosophy is often misunderstood as a narrowly formal exercise. But what we have here is something in such a way that we bring forth the larger gravitas of what it signifies. So Steve, he defended it yesterday. So again, congratulations and mazel tov. Now, Steve Bueno, please speak.
Thank you. I was looking for something rigorous. I was not interested in simply having letters after my name. I also wanted something that was flexible. I was working full-time teaching, helped my wife with our studio business, and had a family. So there was no chance of relocating. And I wanted something too that was affordable. I had no intention of burdening my family with debt, so that fits with the ethos here. GCAS has an opportunity. Diversity is a real key word these days, but diversity sometimes means nothing more than more people who think exactly like me. I like to see genuine diversity as it's expressed here. I'm both pleased to have this opportunity, and you feel that you're being part of larger something than just your own self, your own life and such, I guess we can say. And this is something that I think is quite frankly unique and it's courageous. So I hope to be part of this and witness its continuing growth. I'm very, proud that I can take this intellectual tradition right now. I have some teaching opportunities at Villanova and St. Joe's and Penn State and such. So it's good to also put it right, rubber hitting the road right there. But I just want to end by saying, I'm quite content just to be a part of something great like this. There's a famous philosopher known as Anonymous who once said, a society grows great when that person plants trees whose shade they know they will never sit in. And I feel that's what it's like to be part here at GCAS. Give me the opportunity to at least help nurture something that I hope will offer shade to other people long after I'm gone.
Chancellor, could you please present the next candidate?
I present the candidate for Doctor of Philosophy degree award, Corey James Johnson.
Are you, Corey James Johnson, committed to speaking truth and using your intellectual abilities for the benefit of humanity and all living things?
I so affirm this commitment.
I'm so delighted to hear that. Please speak.
Sure, I'd love to. The first quick memory I'd like to share with everyone was at PAF in France at our GCAS Summer Institute a couple years ago now, with Creston and Rocky and Susanna and all the others, Lewis as well. And there's no other community on the planet I can imagine co-inventing the dances of semantic shuffle and syntactic shake with. So it just is a token of how unique and cosmopolitan and weird of a community we really are. In addition to that, I'd like to speak to 3 reasons for why GCAS has been, for me, an academic experience unlike any other program on the planet. This is freedom, flexibility, and the faculty. In regarding freedom, for those of us whose mission it is to explore the theoretical contours of normativity, it is best when we are able to do so like GCAS, that is outside of the confines of contingent and oppressive institutional norms. Moreover, without this freedom, we block the very road of inquiry. Regarding flexibility, remote learning is obviously the future. The world's current catastrophe has clearly revealed this. With our online GCAS seminars and dissertation meetings, we provide everyone, regardless of their means or academic tribe, access to progressive knowledge. Moreover, without this flexibility, we once again would block the very road of inquiry. And lastly, regarding the prestigious faculty, being able to just dialogue with the leading, what I consider trans-traditional philosophers. So these are thinkers and philosophers that are not committed to a tribe or a school of thought. Both advisors as well as my fellow PhD researchers has been an incredible privilege. The GCAS community, more than anything, is a constellation of characters utterly moved by beautiful ideas. And that is, I believe, what genuine thinkers ought to worship. I am so thankful for the friendships I've made through this rich and vibrant culture, a culture that will surely carry on, as Stephen said, down the road of inquiry as we continue to nurture what GCAS is. And lastly, to echo Rocky's words, GCAS, kick ass.
Chancellor, could you please present the next candidate for the degree award?
I present the candidate of Doctor of Philosophy Degree Award, Mark Andrew Stimson.
Are you, Mark Andrew Stimson, committed to speaking truth and using your intellectual abilities for the benefit of humanity and all living things?
Thank you, Lewis. I so affirm this commitment.
Thank you. Please speak. Thank you. By the power vested in me on behalf of the GCAS community, I hereby pronounce Mark Andrew Stimson, Doctor of Philosophy.
As we've come to recognize, there's an ongoing crisis in both public and higher education. Colleges and universities have been co-opted by the forces of neoliberalism, by a system of spiraling student debt, a system in which academic debate has been limited to narrow spheres of what is acceptable and funded, and further a system that has created a culture of fear among faculty and a sense of their own disposability. As the respected scholar and friend of GCAS, Henry Giroux, puts it, quote, "At a time when market culture is aggressively colonizing everyday life and social forms lose their shape or disappear altogether, educational institutions seem to represent a reassuring permanence, a slowly changing bulwark in a landscape of rapidly dissolving critical public spheres. But public and higher education in the United States and elsewhere are increasingly losing their civic character and commitment to public life as they become more closely aligned with corporate power and military values. At the same time, critical knowledge is relegated to the dustbin of history, only retaining a vestige of support within impoverished and underfunded liberal arts programs that are themselves being downsized and marginalized within the larger institution. End of quote. To my mind, the emergence of alternative forms of higher education, and of GCAS in particular, represents a new and formidable bulwark against the corporatization of higher education, the implicit erosion of social values, and the insidious rise of fascism in the US and elsewhere, which grows on the basis of ignorance and fear. The ethos we are creating together at GCAS opposes fascism's ignorance and fear with open, critical knowledge and with the expansion of hope for a better world. My own experience with GCAS has been one of continual expansion, opening my awareness to new ideas and new ways of being in the world. Each of you, whom I have come to know at GCAS in the past 3 years, faculty, peers, supporters, and honored guests, have shown me novel means by which to explore the many facets of the critical issues we now must face. GCAS has shown me the possibility of what it looks like to flourish together.
Chancellor, could you please present the next candidate for degree award?
Yes. I present the candidate for Master of Arts degree award, Keith Clockerty.
Are you, Keith Clockerty, committed to speaking truth and using your intellectual abilities for the benefit of humanity and all living things?
I so affirm this commitment in this lifetime and the next.
By the power vested in me on behalf of the GCAS community, I hereby pronounce Keith Clockerty, Master of Arts. Keith Clockerty, could you please speak?
I just want to say thank you to everyone who's here today, and to congratulations for such an amazing achievement, an amazing collective achievement that we're all here participating and bearing witness to. Chancellor Davis, President Gordon, I'm humbled to accept this master's for research, which when I first came across GCAS was basically just me huddled up in my great auntie's house, you know, following these random research tangents as I provided elder care for her. I just wanted to call her in because, you know, my auntie Mary Furlong in her house was like the case study, the muse, the collaborator for all of this research. And you know, when I first connected with GCAS, Creston really got it, where I feel like a lot of institutions would really have no idea what to do with, you know, what I was doing. So before GCAS, I felt like I was just kind of, you know, tunneling on my own along these avenues. But once I kind of got connected to what GCAS and the other researchers were doing, I realized, oh, there's so many people doing this kind of self-directed, you know, liberatory research in so many different fields, and that's exactly what we need to have happen. So I'm just grateful to be in community with all of you, and I just want to offer, you know, the challenge and also the support to keep taking these risks academically, because, you know, I think gatherings like this are one of our best ways of maybe finding an alternative to like white supremacist neocolonial capitalism. And I think we all can agree that, you know, we need these alternatives and similar goal. So thank you.
I do want to mention before I turn it over to the president, Keith actually has been issued the stock certificate for ownership in GCAS, making him the first person in modern academic history that we are aware of to both graduate and with his graduation also receives shares in GCAS College as a co-owner.
Now, Mr. Chancellor, could you present the next candidate?
Yes, and this is our last, second penultimate candidate. And I'd like to present for degree award in Masters of Arts degree, Dr. Christoph Solstreif Piker, PhD.
Are you, Dr. Christoph Solstreif Piker, committed to speaking truth and using your intellectual abilities for the benefit of humanity and all living things? I hereby bestow upon you the degree of Masters of Arts. Please speak. Well done. Chancellor, could you present the next candidate for degree award?
I present the candidate for Literatrium Humanitarum Doctor Degree Award, Walter N. South II. Walter N. South II.
Walter N. South II is no longer with us. Although the liturgy says we'll take a moment of silence for him, and I would like to just say something first. This is a situation that breaks my heart. Walter's a man who, to meet him, is to love him. And the reason this was so is because in meeting him, you would meet a genuine lover of humanity and of life. Just his eyes meeting yours facilitate growth. There's a tradition in which to think about an ancestor, one, I have this drink here, pours something in memory. And I just did that. It's to acknowledge that although he's physically departed, he will remain among us. And so with that in mind, let's take a moment's silence for Walter N. South. And remembering Walter, we have Max Reger with Was mein Gott will, das geschehe allzeit, which will be performed by Christoph Solstreif Piker. Thank you. That was well done. Thank you. Is there someone on behalf of Walter and South II who will receive this degree award?
I will with honor.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Patricia South. By the power vested in me, on behalf of the GCAS community, I bestow on Walter N. South II the title of Literarum Humaniorarum Doctor. Patricia South, could you please speak?
I am so pleased to receive this honorary degree on behalf of my husband, Walter South. Walter was a lifelong learner. From the day he joined GCAS, he was thrilled to be part of a group of like-minded, original thinkers and advocating innovative solutions. He was passionate about affordable housing as a right, along with a community's right to make decisions about their future. His dissertation was on a unique model for perpetually affordable housing. And I know many of you had an opportunity to listen to his ideas. Walter relished the GCAS community, where he made friends and he knew that he was an active contributor to and owner of a rich learning environment. So thank you, all of you.
Chancellor? Yes.
The Global Center for Advanced Studies, GCAS College, is so fortunate to have among us a renowned global philosopher who serves as our honorary president. Many of you know him. Some of you work intimately with him as he serves on evaluating your research on various committees. In 2017, after joining us in Maribor for our 4th annual conference and our first institute, Professor Louis R. Gordon succeeded Alain Badiou as our 3rd president. Since this time, GCAS has witnessed an extraordinary growth, especially in the quality and content of our collective scholarships. Our president has published 15 books, hundreds of articles. His interests range widely from Africana to Black existentialism, post-colonial phenomenology, race and racism, that circle around the thought of figures such as W.E.B. Du Bois and Frantz Fanon, among many. Indeed, he is widely considered to be the definitive scholar on Frantz Fanon, many of whom think of Professor Louis Gordon as the successor of Frantz Fanon. But our president's thought is much wider even than this, as wide as it already is, here explained. In the years since we have known him, we have witnessed a revival of the lost art in academic research and distribution. That lost art is extemporaneous speaking. When you see Professor Louis Gordon speak, he can talk coherently and in expert ways in a manner that rivals that of experts who specifically focus on that field. Indeed, Professor Louis Gordon's mind is such that he can quote verbatim passages, long passages, from passages that he's read decades ago. You have to forgive me, we are shooting this on the farm and we have chickens who are curious. So, it is with great pleasure and honor to welcome Professor Louis R. Gordon to give his annual honorary presidential speech in our graduation ceremony. Thank you, Professor Louis Gordon.
To the graduates, to the community, to those who have joined us, I begin with a very ancient greeting, which is Hotep, which means peace. Shalom, peace. Assalamu alaikum. I will add to that Ujambo. I would add to that Matia Vanakam. And I'll add to that Holito and Creston Bonsoir. To all of you, I have to first say, it's so beautiful, so wonderful to see you. We normally would be gathering in person. We'd be in the flesh. But at the moment, we depend on the technologies of communication. Now, the thing to bear in mind is although we're at physical distances, I always stress that we're not socially distant. We're able to gather and communicate and to build precisely not only out of our commitment, but our creativity with these technologies to use them for a purpose much better than those for which they were designed, which is simply to extract wealth from us. One of the things about education that we should bear in mind, and for those of you who would like to see a little more, Asfar Hussain referenced what I posted about what GCAS is and in celebration of our 7th year. I stress the distinction between certification and education. And we should bear in mind that education is a form of empowerment. It's a form of resistance to forces that attempted to disempower us. And that form of disempowerment is one in which the idea of certification without education dominates. If it's simply about certification, you could purchase that, which, as Dr. Mark Stimson properly pointed out, is part of the commodification practices of Euromodern capitalism. But we should also bear in mind that empowerment is also best allegorized by the concept of breath. When we're empowered, we're able to breathe. And what's the point of a certification that disempowers you, that takes away from you the breath of possibility? And so it's with that in mind that when we think through the question of education, we should now begin to understand that education has to prepare us for something much more than simply a set of skills, as Paulo Freire would say, banknotes. This is part of the spirit of GCAS. One of the things I love about GCAS is that although we may have a program, although we may have a plan, you don't really know what's going to happen when you show up. And that's because part of the education is also how we bring our creativity together to deal with the unknown. If you lack the capacity to deal with the unknown, then your formal education has failed you. Now, this meeting is formally granting certification, true, but make no mistake that this is a certification that's matched by education. Its goal is for you to understand that it's being conferred on you by a community that understands ultimately what dealing with those unknowns is about. And there are many ways in which people will present this, but I'm just going to here very briefly just state a small set of virtues that you should bear in mind. It's no accident, for instance, that we talk about truth, because as we know, we're in an age in which truth is under attack. And also, many of us, even those of us who study truth, forget that truth has its origins in concepts of faith and disclosure. And this means that it is connected to dealing always with the unknown, through which we deal and address the precarity of life. So we should think about virtues of love, compassion, courage, excellence, and respect. Sometimes my children have asked me ultimately, what do I expect for them in life? And I often say, I expect for you to be a good human being. But a lot of people, when we think about what a good human being is a human being who knows how to love, not narcissistic love, where you're loving a reproduction of yourself, to see yourself in the mirror. But genuine radical love, the elation in the freedom of others. There's also compassion. As we know right now, we're living under regimes that relish in cruelty. But cruelty withers growth. Compassion understands that people have the capacity to grow despite their mistakes. But to do this requires courage, because you see, courage is when we bring ourselves to deal with our fears as we step forth to reach out to others. And excellence and respect, well, this is one of the reasons you're here, because you're part not only of a community that respects you, but we also understand that we have faith in you to carry the torch of excellence. We meet today in this through these technological resources because of the multiple pandemics and others. Many of you have heard me speak in other contexts where I talk about the pandemics of rapacious capitalism, racism, continued enslavement, etc. And all of those stoke the precarity of life and create vulnerabilities. Well, part of GCAS is to empower you to help others grow and have the strength to press on despite those vulnerabilities. Why are we here? Why do we seek our education? Why do we seek our empowerment? Because at the end of the day, a commitment through radical life, radical love, is the understanding that we must. So to our students, to our faculty, to the families, to everybody who's joined us today, also to our modest donors, because you see, our donors are us. It's not only those who give money to us, but those who teach us everything from composting. Yes, Dr. Stimson, I'm an avid composter. All the way through the insights of how to create affordable housing, which is one of the moments through which I fell in love with Walter South, because of how he was able to dedicate that to the understanding that human beings need homes. And so I conclude by simply pointing out that freedom is meaningless without a home. A home is a place in which you belong, and a place in which you belong is a place that nourishes you and enables you to flourish. As you step forth in dealing with these challenges in life to come, I want you to know, I want you to understand that we, the community of GCAS, is part of your home. Thank you.
I am pleased to introduce to you our keynote speaker for today's graduation address. Professor Dr. Jane Anna Gordon is the Director of Graduate Studies and Associate Professor of Political Science with affiliations to El Instituto, Philosophy and Women's Gender Studies. She's a specialist in political theory with a focus on modern and contemporary political theory, Africana political thought, theories of enslavement, political theories of education, methodologies in the social sciences, and political theory in film and literature. Gordon is, most recently, the author of Statelessness and Contemporary Enslavement, published this year, 2020, with Routledge. She's also published many other books, including Creolizing Political Theory, Reading Rousseau through Frantz Fanon, published by Fordham University Press, and is a co-author and co-editor of many books and published many articles. So it gives me great pleasure to welcome our keynote speaker, Professor Dr. Jane Anna Gordon.
So Susanna Elizabeth Livingston, Stephen Bueno, Corey James Johnson, Mark Andrew Stimpson, Keith Clougherty, Christoph Solstreif-Paker, and Walter N. South II. I'm delighted to join in today's celebration of your many achievements. What is so precious and rare about this moment is how clear it is that your individual achievements are both very much yours and those of your immediate loved ones, and also most definitely ours. After all, in developing the learning and growing wisdom represented by your master and PhD degrees, you are also developing the learning and growing wisdom of the institution and educational project that is GCAS. GCAS has been and is a remarkable idea, a dazzling aspiration. But absent people like you who sought it out as the community and structure through which to pursue your dreams, it would have remained only that. Through your seizing it as the institution through which to realize your aims, it has become material. It has become real. It is so rare that there's such a direct and graspable connection between individual and collective growth and thriving. As you earn your degree, you're quite literally bringing GCAS into being, building an alternative model of generating and keeping human knowledge alive. Among some 5th century Athenian thinkers whose ideas were heavily indebted to their intellectual predecessors in what we now call Egypt, today would be an example of ma'at, or of justice. Your pursuit of what you love and need and have talent for is one and the same as what a larger polity or community or institution also loves and also needs and also has talent for. What constitutes you is constituting GCAS. Your pursuit of self-realization and that of GCAS as a project and an institution are identical. You're in the rare position of not only earning an advanced degree today, you're doing so as also enacting the achievement of one of the most coherent ideas of justice. Like many of you, I'm profoundly moved by the aim of GCAS to create a model of debt-free education. As I was preparing for today, I was thinking about what it is to free the pursuit of the vital human need for ongoing rigorous education from the very real prospect of fiscal danger or long-term economic indebtedness. What it is to disentangle the ensnared relationship between seeking freedom on the one hand and incurring its opposite on the other. This made me think of the final section of a chapter of one of Lewis and my students named Gregory Dukas, who's writing a dissertation about political responsibility, which we've already spoken about quite a bit today. Building part of the discussion from the work of Karl Jaspers and Hannah Arendt, Greg was reflecting on how social reality, which is constituted by and constitutive of intersubjectivity, takes place in and through time. As he reflects, we become and act as political members of societies and communities as we take on, in his words, political responsibility from our ancestors and assume it in an orientation toward our posterity. Or as Hannah Arendt writes when explaining the nature of political responsibility, it means hardly more, generally speaking, than that every generation, by virtue of being born into a historical continuum, is burdened by the sins of the fathers, as it is blessed by the deeds of the ancestors. At first, I was thinking about how, in assuring that you did not accrue economic debts in pursuit of the continuation of your education, that you were free to take on other, more meaningful forms of indebtedness. Rather than saddled with unavoidable economic obligations, you could seek out, even pursue, other forms of debt. Rather than spending years settling accounts in the US with Sally Mae, you could work out how to live your sense of gratitude to those whose courageous deeds have further opened our horizon, or those whose words have unclasped conceptual avenues once shut. But then I realized that I was in error. The profundity of GCAS's approach exceeds the formulation of replacing one form of indebtedness with another. This is because what it offers to the project of education is the loosening of the grip that capitalist monopolies have on, well, everything. In other words, my own thinking that you could exchange one form of debt, financial ones, for another, humanistic or political kind, actually reflects the very problem that GCAS is seeking to address. We need not think of obligations we have to others, whether dead, still unborn, or among the living, or the commitments that we may make and choose to rekindle through the language of debt and indebtedness at all. There are other much richer possibilities that do not reduce everything to the language of fiscal exchange or the settling of economic accounts. We can affirm, with the separation of learning from the strictures of financing, languages that are not so shackled. So in thinking of what marks today, it's not only a moment of realizing a most coherent understanding of justice, whereby your pursuit of self-realization is one and the same as the realization of a larger liberatory project. It's also an expression of genuine freedom, one so genuine that our tired eyes might almost miss it. It's beautiful to celebrate the prioritizing of projects that are utterly urgent and that are not oriented by the immediate or by the exigency only of the right now. In a moment where we speak about the unfolding losses of the present in terms of seconds and minutes, here and now we affirm the seeking of understanding that we can and will never exhaust. Part of why education is so freeing is that it connects us, even if only in fleeting periods, to the beautiful and to the eternal, to what we may know more intimately than anything that surrounds us, even if we could never have physically touched it. I would like to close with some words of and to Walter N. South II, with whom we were so fortunate to share actual historical time. Specifically, I want to speak of the spirit of Walter South in words of another elder, Hannah Senesh, who, like Walter, cared ferociously for human dignity. She said, and we can say of Walter, "There are stars whose radiance is visible on earth, though they have long been extinct. There are people whose brilliance continues to light the world, even though they are no longer among the living. These lights are particularly bright when the night is dark. They light the way for humankind." Congratulations on your affirmation of the value of just such light. Today and tomorrow, we celebrate you.
Having heard our story rehearsed and having bestowed degrees on worthy candidates, we, together as a community, are reminded of our solemn responsibility. In an age of post-truth, where facts and scientific discoveries, hard and coherent, peer-reviewed research is spun for those who want to make profits, to change reality for its convenience, we are reminded of our solemn responsibility as researchers and intellectuals to seek out the truth, to publish that truth, in order to create a more coherent and trusting understanding of our reality for the common good. We are therefore reminded of all those who have sought truth, who have sought and published truth, and as a result have been harmed, sometimes gravely, for such efforts. We therefore take up as our solemn responsibility and as a community to support one another, to seeking out that truth, to publishing that truth together, for protecting intellectual freedom, academic freedom, for the betterment of all humanity. And we are reminded of those who have been harmed in the past because of their search for truth, because they believe in facts. So together as a community, we signify our commitment to that solemn responsibility.
And at this time, I'd like to ask everyone to unmute themselves who are willing to participate. If you don't want to, that's up to you. But at this time, I'm going to ask the question of our community. Do you, as the GCAS academic community, a community of love, collectively commit to speaking truth and disseminate knowledge for the betterment of all living things? Signify that by saying, "We do."
We do.
Do you, as the GCAS academic community, collectively commit to supporting one another in our community and those who are vulnerable as best as we are able? Signify that by saying, "We do."
We do.
We do.
We do.
We do.
And Creston, just before that, I'd like to just add, in addition, as I said, we're supported by a community, and you mentioned Samantha Kosmeyer. I'd like to add Lewin McKinnon, and I'd like to add Feroz Manji. There are so many people here, LaRose Paris, many of you who have been involved throughout. And as we said, the thing is, we bring together the community to set the conditions for the future. And with all that regard, as I said in the statement I wrote, no one's expected to do everything, but each of you collectively has done something which today we're able to meet moving forward.
Our motto in the Gaelic reads, As luethrich solas nua, which is translated into the English, from the ashes a new light. It is our belief that, given the compromising of truth, of reality on all levels that seek profits and greed over the common good for all humanity, we believe our commitment to truth should be sealed and rehearsed and committed to from time to time. So we go forth now into the world by the power of our community and that commitment to the light we kindle. May the light of truth guide us onward and into the future.